That's my computer. Hello, welcome. My name is Dr. Jesse Joyner, and I am here with two of my colleagues from Ascent College, Professor Mark Freeman and Professor Yancy Wideman Richmond. And
Yeah.
I am so excited to have them here today. We're recording this in early January of 2024, so Happy New Year to both of you.
Thank
And speaking of New Year, I know it's a time where a lot of us in our personal lives and in our work lives, we look at what's coming. We look at ahead. We look at the calendar. We look at what is this coming year going to look like. And so for people who work in children's ministry and youth ministry and family ministries in churches and other organizations, I know a lot of them are looking at calendars right now too and saying, what are our goals for the year ahead? And maybe some people do it on different fiscal schedules, like starting in September, starting in June. But January is a good month too to look at calendars. And what do we put on calendars? Often we put events on calendars. So today we want to talk about events for churches and ministries and about the why behind events, what works, what doesn't work, and the biblical basis of events and the goals and purposes of them. So let me just start by asking both of you a question, and you can answer in whatever order you want. But what is an event? That churches like what is how do we define events for this conversation?
Yeah. I don't mind starting with a couple of thoughts here.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is essential when you take a look at a discipleship process, whether it be for a student, an adult, or a teenager, it's thinking kind of through different types of discipleship environments. Most of us are familiar with, our Sunday morning worship services. If you meet for a family service on another night of the week, whether it be for kids ministries, youth ministries, those sorts of things, that's a different environment, disciple-making environment. If you've been a Christian for any length of time and you're follow Jesus, one-on-one discipleship environments are essential as it relates to developing an individual. But I think events and whether it's a retreat or whether it's something you're going and getting away together with like-minded people is a very unique discipleship environment, that certain things grow out of those environments and that sort of soil that you don't get in other aspects in other ministries. And so when you think of your calendar and all the things you put on your calendar and all the different conflicts that are in the lives of families, because everything is competing for the same limited amount of resources. I'm a big proponent of being hyper intentional about whatever you put on the calendar. And so thinking through the lens of the specific nature of that discipleship environment, a getaway event, or even a gathering together, if it's something that's happening at your local church, there's a really unique purpose that's taking place during those events. And so they're not just things that you do, it's for a specific purpose, a specific intention. And obviously every event can have its own unique focus and attention. But anytime I'm putting something on the calendar for my families, the first thing I'm thinking isn't what would be a cool thing we could do together. It's what discipleship task do I want to try to accomplish, and what's the best medium to accomplish that through.
Yeah.
That's good. I have a follow-up to that, but I want to hear from Yancy too, and then I'll ask a follow-up to that. So what's an event, Yancy?
Well, I mean, I think what's coming to mind, even just as he was sharing, is just that it's another tool that we have in ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And so just like any tool in your tool belt has different purposes and accomplishes certain tasks better than others, I think a special event in the life of a church calendar is just another way that we can influence and, as Mark was saying, disciple generations. And I think back to a church, for instance, and I think this is a great way to kind of process and maybe filter through as you're planning events, is like, how can you make this event work and build towards something else in your ministry life and your church culture? For instance, a church brought me in, they were trying to build up their family experience service that they did like once a month and trying to increase attendance at that. And so it lined up where the Sunday after Easter, for instance, they did a big event, and I was there, and I'd written the theme song for their family experience showcase and stuff. And they were doing a prize. And so on Easter Sunday, they passed out these, like, it literally looked like a concert ticket. And like they ended up like exceeding their expectations as to how many new families they got to show back up that next week. But I think that's a great example of just capitalizing on something else that's big and happening in your church calendar, and using a special event to, either lead the way or be a follow-up, or be that hook to get them back in the door, whatever that might look like, for them trying to build up this family experience thing. And so I think it's great to process as you're planning events too, like what can this partner with, and how can you build something, using this special event.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a great start. The follow-up I have, I guess, for both of you is, so what are the core principles we should keep in mind as a guiding principle for event planning? And maybe if for the sake of discussion, maybe we can use a practical example. Like, let's say you're planning a February event, because that's next month. Hopefully people have already started planning that, but let's say someone is working on that, and maybe they want it to be either a daddy-daughter dance, or a parents' night out, or something February-ish, around the themes of God's love, for all people. What guiding principles would you use to plan an event, at your church?
Man, I feel like that's a loaded question.
You don't have to use my
hours.
you don't have to use my daddy-daughter dance example if that takes you off track. If you just want to talk generally about principles, that's fine too.
I will just speak to a passion subject of mine, and that is that you can have an intentional playlist for that event, or share it as a follow-up take home. Obviously, like, love is such an easy theme to be able to run with. And, like I've built a playlist of songs of mine, for instance, that all have to do with love, and it's focused on God's love, whether that's his love to us or our love back to him. But theming that out, and, creating an environment, and within that environment, using music that backs up the theme, that's always naturally the way my head works.
Yeah, I think that intentionality piece, right, is the key, and that's some of what I think Yancy's talking about as well. And she had mentioned earlier, before we started recording this call, this idea of creating a moment, creating an intentional moment. And there's a lot of different types of events that create lots of different types of moments. And so when I think about an event, or when I'm getting ready to plan an event, or I'm going to put something big on the calendar, and typically events are hungry for resources, like human resources, financial resources. So they're usually a big deal. And so I know that those are all limited things. So I want to be super intentional if I'm going to put something on the calendar, thinking about that.
Yeah.
So when I think of my event, one of the main things I start thinking of is what will be unique to this discipleship environment, to this event, that I can't do on a typical, we met on youth group on a Wednesday night or a Sunday morning. Like, what does this environment create uniquely for the purpose of investing in the lives of, whether it be our students or their families, whoever's the target audience of the event? What unique environment does this event provide? So if you're thinking of a retreat where you're getting away, the intentionality of getting away is removing yourself from all of the other things that are going on in your life. It's an interruption of the rhythms and the routines of your life, and we're going to get away for that. So for our teenagers, I honestly sometimes love picking environments where they don't have great cell reception, so they can't be distracted by the things that are going on back home. And so this is a getaway time, a moment. We see this in the life of Jesus. There were times where he would get away, either individually or in small groups or with his disciples, because there was intention and purpose and need for that withdrawal, that retreat, that getaway time. And so you don't always do that if you've got 2 hours on a Wednesday night, or whenever your youth group or kids ministries group gather together. So what is it unique about the environment and the timing of it? Even like you said, when you look at your calendar, there's some natural rhythms that will come up in your calendar that help make sense for whatever your event is going to be. February being a love month, right? So like even in looking at the schedule for my students for youth ministry, like Wednesday was all about love month. So we talked about all those sorts of things. We would talk about, what is love and how do we love one another and what's God's plan and design for human flourishing and all those sorts of things. And then if you've got an event that accompanies that, a marriage retreat, well, not for teenagers, obviously, but like, when you've got things, and one of the things I love that Yancy said, which is so key, is it can't and it shouldn't just be, I mean, it can be, but it shouldn't just be an isolated bubble of an event that as the calendar moves past, it's gone. Like if you're not connecting it to something else, something more, something bigger in your discipleship strategy, it may be a cool moment, but if you can't build on that, if you can't continue to invest in the people from that event, if you don't have next steps in place already for that event, then it's just this massive energy absorber without necessarily long-term benefits to you and your organization, your ministry, those sorts of things. So thinking about, okay, this is a unique environment, but it's got to be attached to the whole discipleship strategy that you have for your ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Have either of you ever been to an event yourself? Maybe you didn't plan it, but you attended an event at a church, or maybe it was a secular event, and you saw it really worked, or it really clicked, and then why? Like why do you think it was successful?
Well, I can tell you, I had an aha moment as a parent. This has been a number of years back, but I had taken my oldest son at the time to Paw Patrol Live, and
very spiritual event.
A very spiritual event, but it brought a lot of things together in my mind from that experience. So, like leading up to it that week, I had seen someone else I know in town, a grandmother, complaining about how much the tickets cost, to go to such event. And she was trying to still get some for her grandkid. And, we had, I think, parked in this ridiculous parking lot that like completely charges way too much. But it's close to the Performing Arts Center downtown. And so, you go through the hassle of, yes, going downtown to this special place and paying for parking and all of these things. And, people are buying Paw Patrol stuffed animals they could have bought at Walmart for a third of the price, like all the things. And as I was going through that experience, I really, my heart grew to appreciate just the opportunity that's there, because I realize parents want to create memories with their kids. Like we've got stuff that we have collected, souvenirs from places that we've gone. And, throughout the year, you look at that particular toy or that thing that's in your house and you remember back to the fun that you had attending that event or, going to that amusement park or whatever thing. And I realized, I'm like, parents want to create memories with their kids. They will go through inconvenience and even expense to create memories with their kids. And I just understood on a whole new level and just was grateful for churches, for instance, that I've been able to partner with over the years, because I realized, yeah, it might be a little bit of a different situation, but ultimately we're creating that type of an experience for a family to be able to go to, whatever First Church, on Main Street in whatever town, and attend a special event where they have fun. Maybe there's food, maybe there's prizes, maybe there's games. In my case, if I'm there, there's going to be, music and a fun concert worship experience. But I realize I get to be a part of creating moments on the calendar and memories that truly last a lifetime for these families. And I just realized, as churches, I think in a lot of cases, we're missing out on opportunities that we would have had to influence our community and disciple our congregation when we don't include special things on the calendar throughout the year, things beyond Sunday, beyond Wednesday night. And so I think it's just a whole different appreciation when you're putting it through that filter of, this event helps a family accomplish this
Mhm.
and make a memory that happens to be centered around Jesus.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I
Go
think
ahead.
one of the things you're keying in on there, Yancy, is all the events that I've ever been to that I felt as I walked away was a success, or is that it met a felt need, right? It met a need that there was a vacuum of at that time in my life. And so the best worship experiences that I've gone to was in seasons where I desperately needed just to press in and to linger, or to whatever, whatever that experience is. Right now, especially post COVID, there is a deep need for biblical community, healthy biblical community. And so opportunities to gather together, to be vulnerable, to be real with one another. I just finished last semester teaching an adolescent culture, or an adolescent development and culture course. And that was, I mean, the statistics are shocking. And this isn't just youth, this is kids and adults as well. Like there's an isolation and a vacuum and a separation from people that kind of started in that season, has continued to perpetuate. But there is this deep longing and feeling and need to be together, and not with just like-minded people, but with a diverse community, which is a healthy biblical community of people, intergenerational, all those sorts of things, like sharing life together again. There's a need, and I think the church is primed for those opportunities. And so thinking about events for your community or for your individual ministries that meet those felt needs, I think is when you walk away and you're like, man, I needed that. That was great.
Yeah, and I can't help but think about the benefit of like the rhythm of the calendar, at least in American culture. It's still pretty centered around things like Christmas and Easter, and whether people are believers or not, there's still a lot of
Mhm.
connectivity that people feel like they need to have during those times of year. And so we as the church, we are uniquely positioned to kind of steward this opportunity, right? That's what I hear you saying, is like the
Yeah.
opportunities that we have to reach our communities, whether they're believers or not. We have things on the calendar already, like Easter and Christmas. And so why not put together something that, what Yancy says, creates
Yeah.
lasting memories between parents and children, because there is something spiritual about that for sure, that we can serve them with. Yeah. Were you
Yeah, and
guys
it's
say something else?
finding a need and filling it, it's like ministry one-on-one,
Yeah.
but I think a special event allows you to do that in a very unique way,
Yeah.
because the options are endless of what that can look like.
Yeah. What are,
Um,
oh, go ahead.
I wanted to
You
give
got it
just a
first.
reminder to people, because I've experienced that some, like, we want events to, like, obviously meet the needs of majority. That would be our success metrics, obviously, is that a whole lot of people were impacted. But I just want to give a reminder too, from things I've experienced in the past, where sometimes it's about the one. And I've had specific events where, no doubt, like a family pastor went into it knowing, like, we did not promote this how we should have. Like, he kind of knew, like, he was set up to not have success. But as such a cool story that I'd done a sidewalk Sunday school that summer, and a little girl had been attending that. Her family was part of another religion, and they had invited them to the family experience that I was doing. And she was like, oh, my parents would never enter a church, like, that's not going to happen. Long story short, the little girl got to come attend with the leader that had been helping at the sidewalk Sunday school thing. When all was said and done, I picked a couple volunteers up, and the one of two people I picked to come up on stage was that little girl. And when all was said and done, like, that family pastor, he knew, like, this was about this one little girl. Like, this whole event, all the planning that had been leading up, was about connecting with this one. And so I would just want to remind us as ministry leaders, because I know we can get easily discouraged when it doesn't feel like all the success points are there. But even when you do all the hard work and the planning and the budget dollars and the manpower and all the things, and you walk away knowing that you impacted one, it was worth it.
That's a great reminder. Like being faithful.
Yeah.
In that regard, and not giving up, right? Not losing hope. If an event on the surface looks like it flops, it doesn't necessarily mean it did. Yeah.
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 Yeah. What are some what are some like pitfalls that we should avoid in event planning, as leaders? Well, I mean, just one that comes to mind for me is like over planning. Is it possible to over plan events? Like plan too many events or get off, or miss the mark? Like, what are some pitfalls we should avoid?
Yeah, I mean, when I especially in family ministry, like when I think of the calendar of our families, they're becoming exponentially busier and busier. I mean, even when maybe it was a while ago now, but even when I was in like high school, like I never had school stuff on weekends. All of my sporting events were during the week, but now like the weekends are getting dominated by school event stuff too, practices, all sorts of things. So being really conscientious of the family's calendars. And I always kind of had this philosophy of like, if I'm going to split up families on a particular night for something and ask them to show up for something or come to something, then it's got to be super intentional and really thinking critically about the calendar and what events we put on the calendar and the why behind the what, for sure, is important. And one of the things, I guess, another thought that kind of has permeated some of the conversation here is, you don't just spend your energy and effort thinking about the day of the event, but also thinking about what is it going to look like afterwards. Is there some sort of follow-up? Is there some sort of next steps opportunity that you want to present? And sometimes this happens even when I'm prepping messages to preach. You always think, oh, that stuff will just come naturally. Like I'll know how to wrap things up. But if you're not thinking intentionally about it and you're thinking about 1,000 of the other details of things that are going on, it won't just come to your mind, and the event will come and go, and you'll be like, oh, I didn't have anyone take any pictures. Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't give anybody any next steps, what to follow up with anybody, how to connect, because you're like thinking of the details in the moment, which is important, but you need to have that big 360-degree view of the event as well. Prep the event and post event sort of thinking as well.
Yeah, like evaluation, writing down ideas.
Sure.
So how do you improve upon this for the next event? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's about all the time we got. Any last thoughts, Yancy, before we sign out, about events in general or pitfalls to avoid?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just, I would encourage churches to do them because
Yeah.
I think it means more to them. Yes, we are dealing with the fact that calendars are crazy, but I've just personally, on both sides of the equation, have seen so much fruit from it. And so it's such a worthy effort. And so, as with anything, pray and seek God and ask Him for, next steps and guidance as you look at the calendar and as you look for what are needs within our families and our congregation and what could we do to partner and connect with them and just meet a need. And I know with anything, God will give you wisdom and He will direct your steps if you'll just seek Him on the subject.
Amen. Amen. Well, thank you both for your time, and
You bet.
I'll put your school emails in the description of the video if that's okay. So if
Okay.
people have questions for you about events specifically, that they can reach out to you.
Absolutely.
But I
Good.
want to thank you both, and thank you everybody for watching this Ascent College First Wednesdays roundtable discussion.
Sounds good.
All
Thank
right,
you.
take care.